Look closely at those around you in every hall of authority and every venue of human competition. From the moment you step into any room, men are silently observing your posture, measuring your boundaries, and assessing with cold precision what you are willing to tolerate. In the eternal pursuit of power and self-mastery, understanding the cost of unnecessary loyalty is not merely an intellectual exercise or an abstract ideal. It is the indispensable shield that preserves your sovereignty and the unyielding blade that carves your path through a ruthless, competitive world. He who ignores this principle surrenders his autonomy to the strongest will in the room, while he who commands it transforms himself into an anchor of authority that no storm can dislodge. To grasp the true nature of the cost of unnecessary loyalty, one must first discard the comforting fables that weak and soft-minded men tell themselves to soothe their anxieties. Most human beings exist in a state of perpetual self-deception, clinging to the belief that if they display unceasing kindness, transparency, and deference, the world will reward them with fairness and unswerving loyalty. History and daily observation, however, reveal a starkly different and uncompromising reality. Men do not yield to passivity, appeasement, or unearned goodwill. They yield to visible strength, absolute certainty, and unshakable resolve. When you examine the mechanics of human behavior without moralizing pretense, you realize that every social interaction is an implicit negotiation of rank and influence. Those who fail to establish their position regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty will inevitably find that position dictated to them by adversaries who possess greater discipline. The primary vulnerability of the undisciplined man lies in his insatiable, needy craving for immediate external validation and reassurance. When faced with unexpected challenges, subtle disrespect, or strategic pressure regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty, he panics and rushes to defend his honor with loud words, hasty explanations, or impulsive outbursts of anger. This reaction is a fatal tactical error. By exposing his emotional agitation, he signals to every rival in the room that his internal core is fragile, insecure, and easily destabilized. A man who cannot govern his own tongue or master his immediate emotional reactions invites further encroachment upon his territory. His adversaries quickly discover which buttons to press, turning his own volatility into a leash by which they guide him. Mastery of the cost of unnecessary loyalty requires you to dismantle this habit of weakness entirely, replacing frantic reactivity with a posture of impenetrable calm. During my tenure as an envoy for the Florentine Republic, I had frequent occasion to observe the inner workings of governance in connection with a Milanese ambassador. A certain prominent magistrate had gained widespread renown for his academic intellect and rhetorical elegance. Yet in practical matters concerning the cost of unnecessary loyalty, he was fundamentally and fatally defective. Whenever rumor of sedition, financial strain, or court intrigue surfaced, this magistrate would summon his ministers into his private chambers in visible distress, pacing the floor and voicing his doubts and hesitations openly. He believed that by sharing his internal burden and showing vulnerability, he would inspire collective devotion, empathy, and absolute transparency among his subordinate officers. The outcome of his public vulnerability was swift and catastrophic. His subordinates did not rally to his defense with heartfelt loyalty. Instead, they carefully noted his anxieties, measured his indecision, and identified the exact points where his strategic resolve wavered. Within months, rival factions exploited his open vulnerabilities, quietly stripping away his administrative authority until he was reduced to a powerless figurehead. His downfall was not decreed on a bloody battlefield. It was sealed within his own council chambers through his total failure to understand the cost of unnecessary loyalty. Had he maintained a tight, unyielding rein on his expressions and kept his strategic concerns strictly private, his adversaries would have remained cautious and intimidated by the mystery of his intentions. The psychological dynamics surrounding the cost of unnecessary loyalty reveal profound truths regarding the hidden, selfish instincts of mankind. Men are driven far more by fear of loss, vanity, and perceived social rank than by abstract notions of justice, morality, or affection. When you interact with associates, rivals, or subordinates, recognize that they are perpetually evaluating your internal fortitude. They observe how you handle high-stakes pressure, whether you yield under intense scrutiny, and how firmly you uphold your boundaries regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty. If you demonstrate that your principles are negotiable or that your composure can be shattered by minor provocation, your authority evaporates instantly. Conversely, when you project a firm, calm, and unyielding presence, men naturally defer to your judgment, assuming that your reserve conceals immense resources and unshakable strength. Establishing sovereignty over your life demands that you construct explicit, unshakable boundaries regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty. A citadel built with weak walls and unguarded gates invites siege and sack. Similarly, a man without firm, enforced boundaries invites disrespect, manipulation, and eventual exploitation. You must establish early in every dynamic precisely what behaviors you will accept and what severe consequences will follow any deliberate transgression. Crucially, these boundaries must never be defended with emotional outbursts, theatrical threats, or needy arguments. Loud threats reveal deep insecurity. Quiet enforcement demonstrates absolute power. When someone breaches a boundary regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty, your response must be swift, measured, and final. By acting with cold finality, you teach the world that your boundaries are non-negotiable borders. Consider another highly illuminating episode from the annals of Italian statecraft, framed around a Milanese ambassador. Two rival military captains were tasked with securing a treacherous frontier province. The first captain was a man of loud, boisterous temperament, constantly making grand speeches, making extravagant promises to his troops, and threatening dire vengeance against his foes. He believed that volume, bravado, and theatrics would establish his authority in matters of the cost of unnecessary loyalty. The second captain was a man of cold, deliberate silence. He inspected his posts quietly, listened intently to his intelligence officers without revealing his own thoughts, and executed his orders with silent, methodical precision. When severe winter hardship and supply shortages struck during the campaign, the first captain's loud promises proved hollow, and his troops mutinied against his bluster. The second captain, having built his command upon the unshakable foundation of the cost of unnecessary loyalty, maintained absolute order and discipline across his lines. His men obeyed not out of fond affection, but because they knew beyond shadow of doubt that their commander was deliberate, observant, and unwavering in his discipline. When the enemy launched a surprise assault, the second captain's forces stood like a wall of solid iron, securing a decisive strategic victory. This historical reality illustrates a timeless maxim. True power never needs to shout. It operates with the quiet, irresistible force of a falling blade. A pervasive and destructive delusion among modern men is the desperate pursuit of universal popularity and approval. Many foolishly believe that if everyone likes them, they will be safe, prosperous, and influential. But in the fierce arena of human affairs, popularity is a fleeting illusion that crumbles at the first sign of serious conflict. When you prioritize being liked over being respected in relation to the cost of unnecessary loyalty, you compromise your standards, tolerate insolence, and dilute your authority. Respect is never granted to those who beg for approval or alter their stance to please the crowd. True respect is earned by the sovereign individual who stands firm in his principles, commands his own emotions, and handles the cost of unnecessary loyalty with uncompromising dignity and self-mastery. Reputation is the strategic armor that protects a wise man long before he ever steps onto the battlefield. How you manage public perception regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty determines whether rivals view you as a formidable adversary or an easy target for exploitation. If your reputation is one of inconsistency, emotional volatility, or weak resolve, you will constantly find yourself fending off opportunistic attacks. But if you cultivate a reputation for calculated foresight, emotional reserve, and unyielding execution, your very presence deters hostility. Men will hesitate to cross you, knowing that any conflict with you carries unpredictable risks and severe consequences. Build your reputation deliberately, block by block, around the core of the cost of unnecessary loyalty. At the very heart of mastering the cost of unnecessary loyalty lies the practice of profound emotional detachment and stoic reserve. When provocations, insults, or sudden crises occur, the undisciplined mind reacts instantaneously with anger, panic, or defensive posturing. The sovereign mind, however, steps back and observes the unfolding situation with cold, clinical detachment. View external events not as personal affronts that demand an immediate emotional outburst, but as objective data points to be analyzed and acted upon with precision. When an opponent attempts to provoke you regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty, recognize that his provocation is a deliberate test designed to break your focus. By remaining completely unmoved, you disarm his strategy and turn his own aggression back against him. One must cultivate acute, unrelenting awareness to detect the subtle signs of disrespect and manipulation that precede open hostility. Encroachment upon your sovereignty regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty rarely begins with a frontal assault. It begins with minor infractions, a sarcastic comment masked as a joke, a delayed response, or a subtle test of your patience. If you ignore these small infractions out of misplaced politeness or fear of confrontation, you encourage the transgressor to take further ground. You must recognize these subtle signals immediately and address them with calm, firm clarity. By nipping insolence in the bud, you prevent minor disrespect from swelling into open rebellion against your authority. Short-sighted men live from impulse to impulse, seeking quick thrills, superficial victories, and immediate gratification. The strategic sovereign operates on a vastly different time horizon when executing the cost of unnecessary loyalty. He understands that true influence, formidable power, and lasting success are built through patient, disciplined accumulation of advantage over months and years. He is willing to endure temporary discomfort, forego easy pleasures, and remain silent when lesser men babble, because his gaze is fixed on the ultimate prize. When you adopt this long-game mindset, temporary setbacks lose their power to disturb your peace of mind. You view every obstacle as a stepping stone and every lesson in the cost of unnecessary loyalty as fuel for your eventual triumph. Information is the ultimate currency of sovereign strategy, and secrecy is the vault in which power is preserved. He who reveals his plans, his anxieties, or his hidden alliances regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty surrenders his strategic advantage to anyone who chooses to listen. Throughout my observations of great commanders and diplomatic envoys, the most formidable leaders were those who guarded their secrets with relentless vigilance. They fed false information to suspected leakers, tested their advisors with harmless confidences, and kept their true intentions concealed until the precise moment of execution. When your moves are predictable, rivals prepare counters. When your moves are shrouded in mystery, your adversaries paralyze themselves with doubt. Master the art of keeping your own counsel, for a secret shared with even one associate is no longer yours alone. There are times in the pursuit of power when immediate confrontation is foolish and tactical retreat is the only wise strategy. The stubborn, arrogant man views any step backward as a humiliating defeat, driving him to engage in battles he cannot win. The strategic sovereign, however, views tactical retreat regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty as a temporary maneuver designed to conserve resources, reposition forces, and lure the enemy into an overextended trap. He yields minor ground without hesitation, maintaining his internal composure while his adversary celebrates a Pyrrhic victory. Then, when the enemy grows complacent and lets down his guard, the sovereign strikes with devastating precision. Never let pride dictate your tactical decisions. Patience and flexibility are far deadlier weapons than reckless bravado. When an opponent launches an aggressive verbal attack or attempts to undermine your standing regarding the cost of unnecessary loyalty, your most potent counterweapon is not counteraggression, but cold, deliberate indifference. Aggression feeds on resistance. When you engage in a shouting match or offer needy defenses, you validate the attacker's importance and lower yourself to his level. Indifference, on the other hand, denies the attacker the emotional reaction he craves. By treating his hostility as trivial noise unworthy of your concern, you communicate absolute superiority without uttering a single threat. His anger turns inward, draining his energy while your aura of unshakable authority remains completely intact. In every institution, court, or social gathering, there exists a hidden structure of unspoken rules and informal hierarchies that govern who holds real influence. The foolish man pays attention only to official titles and loud proclamations, remaining blind to the quiet power dynamics around the cost of unnecessary loyalty. The wise man observes who speaks after whom, whose opinion shifts the consensus, and where genuine loyalties lie. He navigates these subtle codes with understated skill, aligning himself with competence while avoiding unnecessary rivalries. By mastering the unspoken rules of the room, you gain effortless leverage without ever provoking unnecessary jealousy from superior ranks. Your physical presence, vocal cadence, and body language project an immediate message long before you articulate a single word about the cost of unnecessary loyalty. A man who fidgets, avoids eye contact, speaks rapidly, or slouches communicates nervousness and self-doubt to everyone in his presence. Conversely, a man who moves with deliberate calm, holds steady eye contact, speaks in a deep, measured tone, and occupies his space with natural ease projects unshakable dominance. Cultivate this physical self-mastery until it becomes second nature. When your outward demeanor reflects complete internal alignment and discipline, people instinctively yield space and grant respect to your authority. Let us reflect upon a final historical truth from the annals of diplomatic counsel framed around a Milanese ambassador. A veteran statesman once advised a young prince who had newly inherited his realm, "Do not measure your power by the applause of your courtiers or the size of your banquets. Measure your power by your ability to command your own mind, enforce your own laws, and master the art of the cost of unnecessary loyalty. If you govern yourself with iron discipline, your kingdom will stand secure against all adversaries. But if you allow your desires and fears to rule you, no army on earth can save your crown from ruin." This counsel remains as vital today as it was in the turbulent centuries of the Renaissance. True power is not a temporary performance or a mask put on for special occasions. It is a continuous lifestyle of ruthless self-governance and strategic focus. When you apply the lessons of the cost of unnecessary loyalty consistently across every area of your life, you cease to be a pawn in the games of others. You become the principal author of your own circumstances, navigating crises with calm intelligence and building an enduring foundation of strength. Strip away all remaining excuses, reject the victim mindset that weakens lesser men, and take total responsibility for your internal state and your external achievements. Look upon your life with unclouded, courageous vision. Cast aside the illusions of weakness, master your emotional landscape, enforce your boundaries, and dedicate yourself to the absolute mastery of the cost of unnecessary loyalty. Remember this closing lesson: respect, power, and self-sovereignty are never conferred by chance, nor are they granted to those who seek to appease everyone. They are conquered and maintained by the disciplined mind that commands itself, guards its purpose, and stands unshakable against the storms of the world. The world is constantly watching and testing your resolve. Stand firm, act with calculated wisdom, and govern your destiny with sovereign authority.